Good morning, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to day 8, our final day. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. And a little um sad too, I guess. We've been spending a lot of time together for the past month, and your faces are become familiar, your names are becoming familiar. So I just want to again let everybody know that it really has been an honor to spend this time with you all. And so we have gone over quite a bit of information. Today we're going to be going over our skills, excuse me, core skills of advocacy. And we will have a break in between, and then we'll get into advocate self-care. Um, and then I believe Linda will be coming on and we'll do a debrief. And so, yeah, that's how today's going to go. And so thank you, everybody. Justin, I saw your chat. It says he's not been receiving links. And I will double check. If you want to shoot me your email address, um, if you want to message me your email address, I'm going to double check and make sure it was what the issue is with there. All right. So let's see. Next slide, Deb. We have a question here for everybody. And just please type them in the chat if you can. And it is, who are your helpers? Physically, who's your helpers? Emotionally, who's your helpers? Mentally and spiritually. Physically, Alexa says she is her helper. Mom, my husband and sister, husband, mom and daughter, coworkers. I was thinking that I feel like I spend more time with Jolene and Deb than most people. But what I love about working with MUSAC is um we have a morning check-in. I know we talked about it before, but we have this morning check-in, and we're able, and we're not to talk about work right away, like we just, how are we doing and how are things going? And it really kind of opens up a space for all of us to, before we get into work and before we, get into the hustle and bustle, like we check in with ourselves and we do our meditation. And I love that. I think it's really important and it's grounding. And I know there's times where like I'm not feeling well, or say I take leave and I'm like missing that check-in. I'm missing, it's almost becoming a part of my morning routines. And so I love that. That's my medicine. And we have coworkers, family, sage, sweetgrass, cedar, Mother Earth. And besides those, I have my fiance, mom, brother, and my loving, understanding coworkers. Awesome, Sarah. That's what I was gonna say. It could be like those 4 elements. It could be, like our medicines. And so we wanted to just touch base and also remind you to use those as we close today and as we move on and using some of these skills and that we've learned from each other while sharing space when working with survivors. And yeah, so it's really just a reminder of that. Sages, yep. Thank you. You guys can keep adding those to chat if you want, but we are going to move on to the next slide. And just a reminder, we're for sacred elements and keeping those near and dear, not only, of course, during in this space, but in life altogether. I have these sticky notes that I have that are little reminders. That's one thing to kind of keep me aligned and grounded. And I have trust spirit. I have a box breathing sticky note. I have, like little sayings that stick with me and that have meaning to me, that when I'm able to stop, at least I have something right there near my computer where I can just remind myself to remain grounded, because it's hard work. And I know you all may have your own way. And so just a reminder to keep those elements or whatever you're using to keep those near. Next slide. And again, how we've opened up every day was those reminders to interrupt our habits of those characteristics of white supremacy. And I love the breathe one because like when I start talking, sometimes I don't know how, but I do forget to breathe. And then I'm like, I don't know where. And so just, um, again, the perfectionism, trying to always be mindful of our habits that we have taken on or learned, and I think acknowledging those and calling those out, are ways of just breaking that habit. Let me let a couple more people in. Jolene, do you have anything to say about the characteristics? You look like you do.
I mean, we could be doing a 40-hour dealing with just those.
Right.
But no, once again, I always find it fascinating how each day, even, or each season of life, sometimes different things are like resonating as we are all working to really, deconstruct some of those habits that many of us have been forced to develop based on past work environments, or even just those like little things where it's like coded to be like, oh, you need to be professional, and professionalism only looks this way. And so it's an ongoing process. And so I just love that, the more that we can be centering, at least conversations from our work from this perspective, I think it's going to be, we can
Yeah,
change things. We don't have to be the same way.
exactly. I think that's a huge part of advocacy. Is like we do kind of have a role where we have the opportunity to stay outside of those or systems, and so we have that opportunity to kind of disrupt that or call those out, and remind people. I think everybody does, but I think there's a beautiful space for advocacy to be doing that work too. All right, next slide. And then again, the bias support, we do stand in bias support for our survivors, our relatives that have experienced sexual violence. Um, and I know we've gone through this slide every day, but I feel like it's important to open this way and to just remind us that we hold those stories, and we have the honor to be in this role to not only be there for the person that is going through this, but to collect those stories and try to make that change and interrupt those systems that are blocking change. And so a reminder, we meet the survivors where they're at. Um, and our role is to believe, support, assist, and navigate them, or excuse me, navigate, and then and to support that steady navigation through that time in their life. And yeah, so advocate is a way of being in the world. We're willing to challenge harmful people, practices, and oppression. All right. So next slide, please. So like I said, we've gone through, I'm gonna pull up our agenda just to kind of do a little recap of everything. We have shared space for a month now, every Tuesday and Thursday, and we we started out with advocate readiness, and then we got into the fundamentals. And then we went into oppression analysis. Sorry, my dad keeps blowing my phone up. Um, and um, and then we went into kind of the sex offenders piece and what advocates need to know. Um, so we went from the fundamentals, and then we kind of went into the systems also after that, and the responses. Those 11 core principles, oppression analysis. We went into federal assimilation policies, sex offender module, and then kind of like the codes and the importance of all of those, and then the complexities of all of those also. We went into social change, and then the sexual harassment and kind of those legal basics. And then we went into the systems, right? The policies and procedures, law enforcement response, prosecutor, medical response, and then we talked a little bit about mental health, kind of like how we don't diagnose, right? Like what our role is um, in that space, and then some sexual assault response team. And then we kind of moved on from the systems to more of the impacts. And so that elder abuse, child abuse, two-spirit, prostitution and trafficking, and really how all of that impacts not just the survivor, but us and the community and our nations. And so today we're going to be going over the 6 core skills. And Jolene is here today to walk us through that with our team also. So I'm so happy Jolene is able to make it today. And then we're going to close again with that self-care for advocates. So, sound like a plan? It's a lot. It's a lot of stuff. But it's all important information, I feel like. And we're just really like glad we're able to spend this time with you all, and that you guys were able to take this time because we know that your schedules are very busy. So I am going to hand it over to Jolene, and thank you.
Thank you, Steph, for that. I know I keep thinking back because, I was first trained as an advocate back in 2006, which is somehow like 18 years ago. Is my math right with that? And so just really thinking about like what that was like what in those moments when I was just like a baby advocate, just taking all of this sort of things, like all this information in, like what that felt like for me, as well as, what would have been useful. And I don't know, I really, I was part of the original pilot of, this training when it came out. What was that, 10, 12 years ago? And I don't know, just the way that it has grown and changed and evolved to meet the ever-changing needs of advocacy, it has just been a really beautiful experience. And so in hearing Steph talk about all the things that have been talked about thus far in the training, I like that it's kind of culminating where, in theory, this is one of the earlier modules. But when it comes down to it, I feel that we need all that background information for us to then be able to be like, hey, how can we actually incorporate this into our direct work with survivors? And so we're going to talk about these core skills, which, even though advocacy is always changing and ever flowing as we're adapting and responding to the unique needs of survivors, there's certain things that are going to stay the same. And so I like this framework that we'll put out there, and I hope that it resonates with folks. So Deb, next slide. And so, yeah, so we'll talk about these core skills. Hopefully we'll gain a little bit of confidence in as we have this interactive portion, and really think about what this means for you within the work, and how you're going to be really supporting survivors throughout this. Next slide. All right. And so this is something that is really important. It's actually one of the reasons why I sometimes have had a hard time with either these virtual advocacy trainings that we do, as well as, online advocacy programs, or I don't know, there's just something about when you're not in community. But we want to just draw attention to the fact that, if you do not work as an advocate within a direct service program, we really want you to be hopefully reaching out and working in collaboration, so that you will be able to have the local level knowledge of what is useful and what are those processes within your community. And as much as we really want, as much as there's a benefit to being a part of a community-based advocacy program, particularly in states and communities that allow for advocate privilege, which you've already talked about, we understand and we uplift all of the grassroots advocates that are probably many of folks on the call, where this is something that you do because you're passionate about it, because you're already doing it and you want to just hone those skills a little bit more. But so with that, we do encourage you to be reaching out and to be good relatives within your community. Even when we're sometimes wanting to dismantle and work against the systems that have really caused harm, we do still see value in working with local communities when that is appropriate. So please just reach out. We can't tell you all of the information that's going to be relevant to your specific community. And so the more that you're able to be in relationship with those who are doing advocacy and the other interconnected things, all the better, because survivors need us all to be a part of their support circle. Next slide. All right. And so a lot of the advocacy that we have been and will continue to talk about is kind of focused on immediate crisis, or what some people call an acute response, or within basically just within those first little bit um, after somebody has been assaulted. And so in those moments, though, I think that there's often a lot of fear that people get because we want to not cause more harm, right? We want to do things right. We want to really be able to support somebody and not cause more harm. And I've seen folks who end up like who because of, not wanting to cause harm, have ended up being very hands off or not really feeling comfortable when they're forming those relationships. And so with that, I want to start out by saying, first of all, it's always okay to pause. You need to be centered and grounded within yourself when you're entering into space. I remember my very first like hospital call. I was so nervous, and I'm just thinking about like all of those like little like missteps that I did, right? Like I had like this like piece of paper out that I was taking notes on through the whole time, and I wasn't really taking the time to connect with the person who I was in the room with. And so I say this because my advocacy did improve from there, but just knowing that it takes growth, it takes practice, and survivors need us to do all we can um, to truly just be present and to be human. Um, and so with that, more than anything, it's that setting a tone of safety, support, and helpfulness. And with that, sometimes the tone of your voice, people can tell, especially once you know people, but in general, you can tell when people are really either nervous or scared, or if there's even this level of like disbelief, like, is what they're saying really happening? Is that really true? Survivors can pick up on that, right? Survivors are very often very able to read situations and to read humans. And so if you are anxious, they're not necessarily going to trust that you're going to be there truly for them. If you are putting on tones that kind of give the fact that you might not believe what they're saying, a lot of people are going to shut down, and a lot of people are going to not want to further that relationship with you, right? Um, and so one of the things that are like people, is important is acknowledging the harm that was done. And so the way that this is done is in so many different ways. And sometimes it's simply and once again, people will find their own language. And I would love to hear what language people are using, right? Some people, say, I'm so sorry that this happened to you, right? Other people don't always love that language, but just acknowledging the fact that what happened and what was done to them um, is not okay. And it's not something that was their fault in any sort of way, right? And once you're acknowledging that harm, thinking about like, what are the next needs that they have, right? And so we do think of, um, in this immediate response, like, how are we making sure that somebody is safe in this moment? How are we making sure that somebody is safe, when they leave your space, be it at the hospital or be it at the advocacy program or wherever you're meeting with someone? So doing those quick safety checks to make sure that all of those quick needs that they may have are as addressed as you can, right? Um, and I do like this, eliminating the words "you should." And what that means is that people often be like, oh, you really should report to law enforcement, or you should, tell your parents about what happened, or you should, et cetera, right? And when it comes down to this, we can talk with people and we can help them figure out what are all their options. Um, but we should not be putting on them what they should do, especially when we've had often so many of our, when our consent is violated, um, we need to be making sure that we are helping people take that back and feel as in much control in their own spaces as they can. And also when people are in crisis situations, um, sometimes people aren't thinking as clearly, right? You're in that trauma response, it's happening. And you may not be able to, you're heavily influenced by what this person who is, coming in as an expert, even though we are, in many ways peer to peer, people see advocates as somebody who knows, somebody who is in that kind of position of, what I should be doing. And so when we as advocates tell somebody you should do this, it can carry weight, which we shouldn't always be able to hold, right? Let's see. Provide accurate and thorough information and options, as I said. Support choices by helping them make informed decisions. And so this is one where I've seen it's really hard in these situations to sometimes put away your own biases, right? And sometimes that is, particularly around, reporting or going to the hospital or, telling somebody in their life. Because we can kind of sometimes see like what the future may hold when they do that. But we still cannot put our own biases and our own wants and our own stories and our own struggles onto, the survivor that we're working with. And so we're really just helping them we're as knowledgeable as we can about what may happen. And we'll just share that in ways that are as unbiased as we can. Steph, do you have anything to add to this slide when we're talking about responding to immediate crisis?
Um, yeah, I think it's for me, I remember like the first couple times when I started out, I feel like the nervousness took over me to where I was and now that I think about it, when I feel those times coming, when I get nervous, whatever, I feel like I can't truly be like in the moment with them if I'm consumed in my own things. So I think there's a level of like healing or a level of work that you need to do to kind of keep yourself, like I said, keep yourself grounded or in the moment, so that you can be aware of those biases, you can be aware. um you, and I think it, like you said, it takes time. um but I think about that often where I'm like, am I in myself right now or am I with this person? And that's kind of how I gauge it, if I'm having these nervous reactions, I have found ways to try to ground myself. So having a process, internal process for yourself, to be at your best in that moment would be my advice.
Thank you for that. Deb, next slide. And so with that, there's no ever expectation of us to be perfect within our advocacy because we're not perfect humans, right? Survivors are not perfect humans. No one is. What we're really wanting is to help people really be thinking about when we're entering into space, when we are in what is in some ways like this like sacred relationship of between an advocate and a survivor, that we are doing the best that we can and that we're getting as much help and as much information out there as we are able to. And really thinking about like why are we saying certain things, why are we feeling certain ways. And so with that, these skills, I actually don't even remember who first developed them. I know that we used very similar, if not these exact same skills, at another organization that I worked at, which was Praxis International, when we're thinking and talking about what advocates need to do and how all of these skills, so they're connect, understand, analyze, strategize, implement, reflect. And these things go back and forth. And these are things that we're constantly having to do as an advocate. And as folks, progress in advocacy, you're going to learn different skills that work best for you, and different language that feels most authentic to who you are. And And I think that's really at its heart. Like, are you coming to someone truly in that human to human way and really being able to just be transparent and be authentic with people, right? And so we're going to walk through each of these. And these are just some of the skills, and we'll kind of be modeling a few of these and having some good conversations. And please keep chatting in like these different things that are kind of coming up as we're thinking about like, what does it really mean to be an advocate, and what is kind of essential within this space. So, next slide. Connection. And so the skill to connect is really at its core of what we do within our work, right? I think it's really about relationship building, and it's about really just trying to be in space with somebody. And so this is building relationships with and among survivors. And so that's, our one-on-one relationship. That's our relationship with a survivor and our whole of our organization, right? It's also really trying to form connections and the movement building parts that come, where with sexual violence being so endemic in our communities, um, well, we're talking today a lot about direct advocacy, that one-to-one sort of work post-crisis. We're also needing to be thinking on that bigger scale, like what are we really doing collectively, and how are we helping to both form those relationships between survivors, both to have that peer-to-peer like true connection, but also we're hoping that we need all of us to be able to really create lasting change. And so more that we're able to stop isolating and stop having sexual assault be this thing that we kind of like keep only behind, closed doors, when the healing is all happening, in this like one room. If we're really able to kind of form connections and strengthen the overall like network and relationship that people have, it'll help all of us and help all of our communities. And so with that, it's that connection for support to strengthen that community, and really creating solidarity around the issue of sexual violence and all forms of violence. While we're talking about sexual violence today, other forms of oppression, including the racism, the ableism, as well as how so many of us hold multiple identities. We're having to be working on all of those things. And so the more that we can be connected, both within this movement and externally, the more chance that change will actually be happen and last. With connection, it's really taking into account you're connecting fully with somebody, right? The mind, the body, and emotions, and recognizing that for some of it, it's also, connecting internally. You're helping survivors connect with themselves, and maybe with tradition or culture, and in ways that maybe people have never done before. It's also an opportunity to share experiences with someone they can trust. And so this can take a while. And so this is one of the things that I know is hard with an advocacy, because often somebody will call, or you'll meet with somebody, or you'll be at the hospital with somebody. And there's meant to be this level of almost inherent trust, where all of a sudden, simply because of your role, this person is supposed to be like, oh, I can trust this person. But life isn't that easy. I mean, how many people have had therapists that didn't work, right? Where you start to form a relationship and you're like, oh, this person's not for me. Or even in other forms of connection in our life, where trust doesn't happen in an instant, even with, positional authority. And so really thinking about how are we able to, even within like crisis advocacy, take the time to truly be forming those relationships and building that trust with somebody. And part of trust, as I think we've talked about, is that idea of being authentic. And people can tell when you are being false, or when you're trying to, or when you think that I was gonna say putting on airs. That's not the right phrase, because it sounds silly. But if we're able to really just be in space with somebody and just be real, people want real talk. And people want people who are genuine. We're also assessing to assess the accurate knowledge about sexual violence, possible actions to take, and potential outcomes. And so in addition to connecting with you connecting to themselves, connecting with other survivors. You're also, one of these core skills is connecting them with external resources. And that can be other people, that can be actual tangible things, that can be other services, that can be connecting them with the knowledge that they need to make those appropriate, to make what's best for them, and the choices that will come from that. All right, anything on connect, Steph? Next slide, Deb. And so let's see. So in this situation, so we're going to have kind of like a large group brainstorm, and I want people to both feel free to chat in, as well as unmute and have some conversation about this. And so in this situation, you know, a survivor says, you know, please don't tell anyone. You probably won't believe me either. When I told my cousin, all she said was, well, I told you not to go to that party. I don't want to go to school tomorrow. I'm not sure I can handle this. And so, what are some of the fears or concerns that this survivor is bringing up? That's the actual question. So, what are some of the fears or concerns? Being believed, facing the perpetrator and embarrassment, simply others finding out, shame and blame, losing hope, being blamed and shamed. Yes, thank you all for this. And so if this was a situation, which is very, very common, right? I mean, even on a lesser, not lesser scale, but I mean, often we're dealing with this like on a day-to-day relation, on a day-to-day with other parts of our life. You know, the police don't tell anyone. And you probably won't believe me either. How would you respond? Oop, how would you respond to somebody? So you're this person's advocate and they are telling you this, they're having this conversation. How would you respond to them? Telling them that you believe them. Mhm. Reassure that you believe them, it was in no way their fault, and you can be there to help them handle it whatever way they would like. Mhm. Thank them for sharing with you with compassion and a listening ear. It's so scary when you feel no one will believe you. I believe you. Thank you for trusting me, and I believe in you. And so I think also with that, you know, give clear options of routes to take, but assure them you will support. And that's the thing, like, so often, like, when we tell somebody and, like, I mean, I've worked with, you know, both many survivors, but also even, you know, people in my personal life or coworkers in past positions where they're like, "I told people, but no one believed me, and so I just wanted to stop telling people," right? And so if no one's responding in a way where you feel safe to do anything, you just start to internalize and you start to shut down, right? And so just simply, yeah, the starting of that relationship is the believing. And even though other people might not believe you, like, I'm here for you. And also acknowledging. So then we're talking about that. I don't want to go to school tomorrow. I'm not sure if I can handle this, right? And so maybe there's also some other things that you might wanting to be thinking about in terms of like safety checking, right? You know, um, well, we're not wanting to, you know, leap to conclusions. There's also this like true fear of like, I'm not sure if I can handle this. And what could that mean? Are they potentially, you know, thinking about self-harm? Or are there other concerns that, you know, they may be having? If they don't want to go to school tomorrow, is it because of safety? Like, do they think something else will happen? So, I mean, I think there's levels of, especially like, kind of like depending on how the relationship goes, that you're able to start to broach things, right, in ways that are respectful. And showing them that. Steph, what are you thinking right now?
Um, I'm thinking this person probably hasn't been believed for many things. And so that that trust is, really not that they don't trust you. It's for whatever reason, or the continuous of not being believed. Um, and so I think explaining who you are and why you're there is important. That you are there for them, that, it could be a confusing time, and anybody coming in, it could be looked at law enforcement or whatever, so explaining what an advocate does, and what, that they are specifically there to support them. And then also trying to understand where that fear is coming from. So you can better, maybe bring somebody else in, or a family member, or, whatever it takes. I mean, think how are you going to know if you don't ask them, like, okay, what is it that is, your fear is, or, and trying to respond in that way by knowing.
Exactly. I see Becky has her hand raised.
Yeah, but I was going to say, Stephanie kind of touched on it too, that maybe assuring them that when they have family members or friends who are not believing them or seem doubtful or suspicious, that it's not a reflection on them or are they a believable person. It's often that that person who's hearing this news, they are in a place that they can't accept that. Maybe it just is too much for them right then, or, they don't want to face that truth, and that not to demonize that person, but just to know this is not my fault that they don't believe me. I just need to talk to somebody who can accept that this did happen to me and help me.
Thank you for that. Yes, and that's the thing though, like also like I mean, I think we've all had experiences, where we've told somebody and their immediate reaction was not very helpful, and sometimes it could make you feel worse. And sometimes it was just like, and so that's the thing, like maybe this cousin eventually could be a good support network for them, right? But what they were able to respond was not helpful in that moment. Like, well, I told you not to go to that party. So therefore, the onus of responsibility falls on the survivor. If they wouldn't have went to the party, it wouldn't have happened, right? Which is kind of what people often feel. And so it's, yeah, that idea of being like, no, regardless of, you should be able to be safe to go to that party, right? And so helping them just to reassure that. And so, yeah, so this is just a little bit about that connection, right? It sounds like they tried to talk to somebody they trusted, but was not believed. Yep. Next slide, Deb. All right, so connection is core to everything. And so once you kind of start to connect with somebody, you have to like then be able to understand a little bit more, right? Um, and so part of this is understanding is literally the knowledge that we as advocates and we as humans have to know more about what are realities within communities, right? So the recognize and know the nature of violence against women. How it appears in the lives of women and survivors, both individually and collectively. And I think that's part of, even being part of this training, right? Sure, many folks came in with a good solid knowledge of many things, but the more that we're able to delve and really focus in on the harm that sexual violence has caused to us as humans, as us as families and communities, and even broader than that. The more we understand, the more we can really help to kind of see it more, as well as we're able to then help to respond and to hopefully prevent the sexual violence from continuing to happen, right? We're also working to understand the multiple and intersecting needs, and that's both on working with individuals, and because everybody within their own lives has those multiple and intersecting needs, right? And so people sometimes have a hard time being like, well, why isn't the survivor doing this? And sometimes it's because, hey, they're also dealing with a sick child at home, they're also trying to work. Many of us right now are working 2 jobs, and so if we're understanding, oh, there's this reason why this person might not have time to, always have like a weekly advocacy appointment, right? And so then thinking about, okay, so I understand a little bit about what their life is right now. How can I still be providing them support in a way that's not adding extra onto an already very heavy plate, right? And you're thinking holistically, right? So with all these different parts, both of our own lives, as well as with that medicine wheel of us as humans, how are we really helping to not just, you know, meet their tangible needs in a moment, but really taking that look and thinking about how is this impacting their health? How is this impacting their spirituality? How is this impacting just the way they're able to kind of be in space? And so we're not kind of trying to segment people's lives off, but we're really trying to put that whole piece together. And the more you can understand, it can also help victims recognize that we're not alone. And that's one of the things I've seen related to like providing like support and training to like communities across the country. Is that often like even like as advocates, people feel very alone or think that, you know, their community has all of these issues and no one else can understand them, right? But once you've worked with like community after community after community, you recognize that this is often everything, like we're not alone in this, and that there are people out there who have experienced similar things and who are going through similar struggles. And sometimes it's just we're needing to connect and not feel so isolated. There is this breath that comes when it's not just you, right? And so that's the thing that happens so often with survivors is, you know, they place a lot of like shame and blame onto themselves because of the external things that are happening. But it's like, oh, you know, no one will quite understand, or people will judge me because, you know, this is what happened to me and it happened within my family. And so people will think that's gross and all this kind of stuff. But in fact, it's happening in so many communities. So the more that we can normalize in the fact that it's not isolated, not normalize in the fact that it's okay to do this harm. But the more that we can have people understand that it's not just you, you are not alone, truly, we can work towards healing as communities, right? So anything to add on this, Steph?
No, no,
Understanding.
thank
Do you
you.
understand the understanding, Steph?
Yes, I think I'm following. I was letting people in. I'm sorry. There's a couple of people trying to get into the meeting right now.
Mhm. Yep. So yeah, so connect, understand. And so next slide, Deb. And so to understand, you have to be curious sometimes, right? You have to both have like a little bit of like baseline knowledge, which like, for example, like we're hoping to provide through this training. But within with each human and which each situation that we enter into, we have to be curious, right? We need to learn more. And so just so these more open-ended questions, right? Thinking about describe to me, tell me more about, you know, how that made you, or how you felt in that moment. Tell me more about your life. Tell me more about who you are. Help me understand. I'm thinking that, and so sometimes it like, you know, with that, you're able to kind of synthesize what somebody's saying and reflect it back on them, and thinking about, hey, you know, I'm thinking that when you said this is what you meant. Is that correct? I mean, I know that's kind of a close-ended question when it comes down to it, but the more that we're able to just be curious, right? And that's letting go of any of these like limitations, right? We're thinking about being with somebody fully and completely. We're relating as equals. The more that we can be curious and the more we can just like ask questions and just kind of be in conversation with somebody, the better. And also survivors know things, right? Survivors know their community. Survivors know themselves. Survivors also know better than us sometimes how, you know, people in their life will react or what will happen if they go this course, right? And so we have to recognize expertise that comes with them being in control of their own life, right? And so how do we help to couple the knowledge that we have, because, you know, we've been working, you know, as advocates, we've seen this many things happen. We've seen how this goes and how this goes, with their knowledge, and making sure that the more that we can kind of meld the things together, that's what's going to be best for that individual, right? Because you may have been, you know, being an advocate for, you know, 5-10 years, you've worked with hundreds of people, but each person is unique, right? And that we have to truly still be present and curious about them as humans. And I think that sometimes people think that questions can, I don't know, questions can come with a level of judgment, right? Questions can come with, are you just wanting, like, why do I need to know this? right? That's one of the things that we always do have to ask ourselves with as when we're working with survivors is this information actually going to help me better understand the survivor and then also then better be able to provide them with support and help, or is it something that we're just wanting to know for our own curiosity, right? And so always also trying to like couple that, right? When you're understanding, do you need to know all this information, or is it just going to kind of like feed that itch that you have? If there's other phrases that you've started to like, use within your own work, please chat those in. I know that a lot of people have their like go-to ways. I work with, I am also like a licensed therapist. And, so many of my friends who are clinicians and who provide therapy have just such like good go-to ways of like forming things and ways of helping people like pull information out in a way that is organic and reciprocal, right? But there is, once again, that difference between being a therapist and being an advocate, right? And so, but if you have any kind of other like skills or things that you have been told, this is a good way to, speak with survivors, drop those tips in. The more language that we each have, the better. Steph, is there anything that you have as like a go-to way of, building connection with somebody or helping yourself understand things more?
Yeah, I guess I think about like our values, our traditional values, like the honor and staying humble. Um and when you feel like, I guess for me, if I felt like I was becoming and like it was becoming um staying as an equal, staying in that question and learning mode with them. And it is understanding, but you're also as a new advocate trying to learn um like your skill and your how you're going to relate and use those for another survivor also. So I think when we stay in that mode, yeah, that like we stay in that mode that I'm learning and I'm understanding, it's also gonna keep us on the same like level, and the survivor will feel that.
I'm curious about just even like naming that. Oh, also, so somebody else said, also going on walks and car rides where you're side by side versus facing them. So even when you're understanding, how are you creating the conditions that allow for somebody to feel safe, right? Where you're not all like, when I first started as an advocate, I had uh, a coworker who told me that, I need to make sure that I'm putting at least, 4 feet of space between me and a survivor, and I need a desk in between us for safety and all these sorts of things, right? Which there's valid reasons why people may believe that. But for me, it's like, how are we taking away some of those literal barriers and being able to have true connection with somebody, right? And so are you creating, by going for walks with people, if that's an option, like you're kind of sometimes you're breaking down some of those barriers and you're being able to just be human with somebody, right? And so I guess part of understanding is understanding what makes somebody comfortable and how we can build those connections better. So um next slide, Deb. All right, so for this exercise, um actually, I'm just going to take a pause from like the actual thing for a second. Steph, since I haven't been on, have we been doing breakout rooms, or how would you like to go about this exercise? I wasn't able to connect with you beforehand.
Yep. No, we haven't. I attempted and failed on the very first one, and I've been too scared to ever since. No, but we've been kind of keeping everything here in the same in the large group and kind of working through them as a one group.
And so then for this, I would recommend, trying to find somebody like, and this is something that one of the things that I loved about doing my advocacy training was that one-to-one connection I was able to have, with, and to be able to try things out and to actually be like doing these exercises in person. Also, I will be fully honest that I almost did not pass my advocacy training because I was so nervous during role plays. They had us do so many role plays, like pretend you're on the phone with somebody, pretend that you are at the hospital, and having us like walk through scenarios like that. And because of my own stuff, I didn't like being in large groups doing that, right? I did not feel comfortable role playing with like in a fishbowl situation with, 20 to 30 people around me, right? But what really helped me and where they were like, oh, Jolene, you are good to go to be an advocate was that one-to-one time with somebody where I just sat there and we walked through scenarios with like the one trainer and we were able to do that. And so if you have coworkers or colleagues to try to take a little bit of time and just practice some of these skills, it will be good. If you honestly just want to have time with somebody else, like reach out and we will be able to kind of set up some time to be able like, let's talk through some of these things. Let's have you practice. Let's have you try out some language and try to break down that nervousness. And so we'll kind of give that to you as a little bit of extra homework, is to be trying these things, or even like within your own family. It's kind of I think many of us who have children have had to do am I testing out work theories on my child, which is sometimes good. It's better for me to be like, describe to me, or, help me understand why you're feeling this way, to my 13-year-old when she's filled with chaos. But so that's my homework for you all, and we'll get that out, within all the slides. But just recognizing that when you speak, you also want to make sure that people I think we had the module already on active listening, right? So when you ask questions, you actually have to be there to be able to respond, and we have that responsibility. And you're not there just trying to formulate the best reply, right? You're not there to, like, when somebody's talking to you, you're not being like, oh, how do I respond in a way that's going to be good? But you're truly there and present with somebody. Yes, I noticed taking on this job has built my confidence when talking to people. And it really does. And it's hard at first. And for some people, it's not, right? Some people have no qualms or issues with forming relationships, and it's just a natural way. And there's also many of us who, even though I did not always have the natural skill of advocacy in some ways, I was always that sort of person where people trusted me, where people would tell me their things. And I think many people on this call probably have that same thing where it's like, oh, I know way too much about too many people, because you have a face, or you have that natural way of being where people feel that they can tell you their secrets and their things that they often haven't told other people. But what do we do with that? We understand. Yeah. Next slide. As we say, so then you take that and you analyze it, right? This next core skill is analyze. And so I don't know, like, I personally would call myself, very analytic, but that's also not something that that resonates with everybody, right? But you're taking the situation, you've kind of, formed these connections, you have gotten a little bit of more understanding about, what's going on. And then you kind of take that information, you're like, oh, what can we actually do with that? And so it's that moment where your head is kind of going like a little bit like busy, trying to figure out like the choose your own adventure way of how can we best be helping and supporting this person in this moment, right? So with analyze, it's develop a course of action that alleviates the problem and generally meets the needs that are generated by gender-based violence. That language does not come out of my mouth very well. But we're trying to explore all those sources of help, right? So you're thinking about, who can you possibly connect them with? And this could be, people within their own families, people externally, other partners. And talking with them truly about like, what are the risks? What are the benefits of all of these different steps that we could take? And helping them, not bombarding them with information or fear, but really helping to be like, hey, these are the things that could happen. This is what would happen if you went this way. These are your choices if you do this. And laying it out there and helping people also analyze and discern for themselves what will be best. Strengthen self-determination. And so it's also very easy for us to sometimes want to take over and do, particularly if people are seeming in a vulnerable position, or you don't want to like add more, to their plate by making them make these choices or having them, do this or do that. but we also, our role is not to do for others. It's to really be helping them figure out the best courses of action and how that they can do and support it themselves. And you can be right alongside them. And there will be times where you will be doing things for them, but that's based on, you know, once again, their own determination that that is the best course of action for them. And the more that we can analyze, the more that we can, you know, be talking through things and thinking about all the different ways, that's where you can kind of gain new perspectives. And that's where it's also like heavily linked with the understanding is that if you were to just kind of jump in and make these things without taking the time to understand, you might not know all of the options that somebody may have for them, or you may not understand why they may not want to go a certain route, right? And so to be able to gain those new perspectives is integral to, you know, supporting them in this time of crisis. Next slide. And so once again, you know, so we're asking questions and that curiosity that comes with understanding. We're also trying to think about like, what are those helpful questions that can help us as we're analyzing, right? As you're exploring the risks and benefits with the survivor. So what would happen if? Would it be helpful if? What if we did this? And so we're just trying to think about like different ways of formulating questions or formulating like ways of saying things that isn't presenting you as like, this is the final option, or this is the way that you have to choose. But really generating more conversation so that a person can come to the accurate decision so that after they've analyzed all the options. Next slide. All right, so you've analyzed, so you've kind of come up with all these things, you've thought about why things may be a certain way, and then you need to kind of take some action on it. And so you're going to strategize, right? So this is, you know, working out the details of a course of action. Like, what are the steps that are going to be done? What is the actual work, right? And sometimes we as humans want to do like, oh, we have that big goal in mind, but we don't always think about like what are the steps that we need to do to get us to that point, right? And so within this role of advocacy, you're both having to think about that big picture, like what is that end goal, but also really be helping with some of those, okay, this is how we're going to accomplish that. And also, how are we going to help prepare a survivor for each of these steps that will come, right? And so, yeah. And so all of these sorts of things have kind of already been like, you're doing some of these things in multiple ways, right? And some of these are happening concurrently, where when you're strategizing, you're also, you know, having to be talking about, you know, the pros and cons. You're also thinking about what are the contingencies, like what happens if this happens, right? But really it's about deciding on those courses of action with a survivor. Anything to add, Steph?
I just wanted to point out, like, if you get to that point and you feel like you need to go back to any of the steps and to relook, reanalyze, you know, and more questions if you fully don't understand, that's always, I think that's why the arrows on that diagram go back and forth. It's fluid, it's, you know, but when you get to this point, I think it's important to know your resources in your community. And so that's why I really think it's important to go out and know those resources and kind of the systems and how they work, and you know, reaching out to those different programs and just knowing kind of because it's really hard to strategize and kind of help them if you don't know yourself. So I just wanted to put that up there.
Thank you. Next slide, Deb. All right, so you've created you've connected, you've understood, you have analyzed, you've strategized, and now you got to do the stuff, right? You're actually implementing that course of action. And so, and these are meeting the real needs of people. And really it's helping to, and some of this is going to be, you know, we're implementing a plan for how somebody is going to get, you know, new locks on their door, or we're implementing a strategy for them to go through their campus process against the harm doer, all these sorts of things. So no matter what it is, we're now at the point where we're just doing it, right? And so we're also kind of having to always be thinking about like, okay, so as we're taking these steps, are there different ways that times that we're needing to pause it, that we're needing to make sure that we're doing check-ins with the survivor and they feel comfortable with the way that things are being implemented. Yeah, I don't really know what more to say about, like, implementation is really about just doing the things as discussed and making sure that there's enough flexibility within a space that we could, that with survivor guidance, that you're ready to pivot if need be, right? Because even with the best laid plans, you're always having to adapt, right? Next slide. Reflect and adapt. That's what I just said. I'm going to ahead of myself. Continuously question, review, and revise the course of action in relation to shifting conditions, the success and failure of strategies used, as well as intended and unintended consequences of actions. And so once again, this is also something that we do, I think, just constantly, right? This is both when we're working with direct survivors. This is when we have, planned a new outreach strategy. We're having to take that time to pause and like, did that work how we wanted it to? Did something weird come from it? Is there anything that we're needing to shift to actually make it, even have more efficacy or be more efficient in the way that we are doing this? And then from there, when you're noticing something, making that change. So you're like, oh, so we were originally going to, try to go this, we're hitting these roadblocks. So now we're going to explore this option instead, right? And recognize and change strategies that have been unsuccessful for individuals and for all victim survivors. And so we don't want to just keep repeating these things that have not worked. Or we don't want to be forcing a survivor down a path that we're seeing is not having the goal that was intended. And so at that point, we're having to really be thinking about, okay, so that didn't work, what can work? And sometimes that also means that we may be having some real talk conversations about helping people even like redefine, what does safety look for them? Thinking about how are they, if the end result, if they really want, somebody to be put in jail, for example, or prison, and that's not looking like its end goal, how are we helping to, within this, as we're adapting, as we're shifting things, helping them figure out, okay, so if that's not the end result, what are we still able to have for you as a sense of justice? What can we be doing if your original end goal isn't going to be met, right? And so this is, once again, and in order to be able to accurately reflect and adapt, you have to have true connection and you have to have a true understanding about what circumstances are. Steph, you look like you're thinking about something. And anything on reflect and adapt?
No, you said it really well. You touched on a couple things I was gonna say. But yeah, I think some of that adapting might be also just the survivor changing their mind, and just always keeping the victim centered, and supporting them in their own decisions. So you can have this plan and you be, trying to, what was the last one again? Implement it,
Mhm.
and the survivor decides this is not what I want. And so some of that adapting, maybe shifting, on their needs and wants also.
Mhm. All right, next slide. And so all of these steps are sometimes this process can be anywhere from you're spending 30 minutes with somebody and you're doing all of this almost in that course of time, or this is happening repeatedly over, the length of a relationship with somebody, or within the length of a program, or whatever it may be. We also used, I've seen it's basically, it's a basic kind of evaluative model, right? You're figuring out, hey, what's actually going on? What do I need to know more about? You're kind of taking hey, we need to make a change or actually do the action. And then we're pausing and thinking about, hey, this is what worked, this is what didn't, and this is where we need to go next, right? And so I think that, well, these steps, you don't always have to be thinking like, oh, have I connected enough or have I analyzed enough? It's really about how are we taking all of these skills and using them when we're with survivors on that day-to-day basis, right? You're not just going. You're not just implementing. You're not just, giving somebody the same advice, you know, that you would have given somebody last week and that you would have given somebody next week, but that you're taking the time to get to know them. And really, I always like to think about it also in terms of the seasons, right? Where the work that we do is cyclical. The seasons are cyclical. And there's times where, for me, like summer is that time of action. Summer is that time of movement, of doing. But then after summer, you know, we're kind of getting this transition period, and then it comes into winter, where for most winter times, that's when we do that pause. That's when we're kind of thinking and reflecting about what do we need to do in order to have a good spring as we're coming up, which is when you're learning more and implementing more. And so just always be thinking about um, how even if you've been doing this work for a long time, even if you've been working with a survivor for a long time, there's always different things that we're having to learn more about, connect more about, and really shift the way that we're doing our work. Next slide, Deb. And so we're going to walk through a few kind of scenarios. We're not going to do them in dyads, but I would love for folks to, you know, maybe be chatting in or highlighting, you know, what they're thinking, right? Feel free to also, you know, like raise your hand or come off mute as needed. So in this first one, Betsy is a 68-year-old woman with severe back pain. Annie called when she found her mother covered in bruises and crying. Betsy said her husband came home drunk and beat and raped her. She is reluctant to talk to an advocate. And so in particular, thinking about that skill of connect, what are some ways that you would connect in this situation? And so Annie is calling in because her mother, Betsy, is covered in bruises and crying. How would you form connections either both with Annie or with Betsy? This is a hard one, so I'm just going to like leave plenty of space for folks to take time to kind of chat in or to even reflect and think about that. And so Steph, in thinking about this, how are you seeing connection? How would you start to build connection in this situation? Oh, you are muted, Steph.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I think at this point, making sure they're safe and starting to get them comfortable, you know, find a place that they feel comfortable and start
Mhm.
asking questions like
Mhm.
smaller questions first, and making sure, you know, building that trying to build that trust, and so that they can begin to help me understand
Mhm.
where they're at. Oh, Holy Alex said that too. She said, "Can you help me understand?"
Deb, could you go back to the last slide? And then Amber, what were you thinking?
I was going to say something similar, just building trust and working with them on smaller things, like maybe even I was working with an elderly lady and we talked about like the food pantry and that kind of stuff first and getting some of her other
Mhm.
needs met. And then she called me back, you know, and then we kind of got
Mhm.
familiar and talked about some other things after we talked about some resources
Mhm.
we could help her with, regardless of if she told me anything. And that's kind of how I always approach it.
Yep.
I'm always like, it's up to you if you want to talk. If you don't, we can just help you with what you might need.
Mhm.
That's all. Thank you.
Mhm. Yeah. And so thinking about, are there also kind of with that, you know, are there other informal ways of having connection, right? Because it is like, it just does not sound very fun to be like, I'm just going to go meet with this advocate and feel this like obligation to like tell them all of the stuff, right? And so if you're thinking about, oh, are there other ways of forming these like connections? Like, do you happen to have, like, I mean, I know like when I was an advocate, you know, like we had like a weekly beating circle, right? And so people would come and there was no pressure, there was no actual expectation to be talking about anything, but it was just meant to be there have space for people to kind of be around each other. And slowly from that, often people would start to build trust and they'd be able to build habits. We're also, talking about, with Annie, how are we providing Annie with that information so that she can be better supporting like her mother and also taking care of herself in these situations, right? I would share, understand how difficult it can be to speak with somebody about being hurt. I would share we can connect and then she can decide if she feels safe enough to talk about, but she does not have to talk about anything to receive support, right? So guiding any potential processes, yep, giving those options, and also kind of thinking about how are you talking about the confidentiality portion, right? Perfect. Risk assessment and safety planning if needed, yep. So what could be done, yep. And yes, acknowledging the secondary trauma, especially if you're calling in, like, I mean, it must be hard, for Annie, because she's wanting to, and I'm sure that Annie's wanting to do its best too, right? And how are we helping to provide her with that, as well as skills and language to be helping, her mother if need be, right? Right, next slide. Geraldine, age 22, was raped by a serial rapist. The U.S. Attorney's Office contacts you stating Geraldine would like to talk to an advocate. She'll told there isn't enough information, isn't enough evidence for the case to move forward, and Geraldine is angry. So thinking particularly about the skill of understand, what would you do when you were talking to Geraldine?
I personally, I mean, for me, I would just reading that makes me feel this anger, right? So
Mhm.
being there for that person, always trying to
Mhm.
let them know why my role,
Mhm.
that I'm there for them, build that trust, make sure the environment is safe and comfortable. But um sometimes people will just need a vent,
Mhm.
and if I could relate with that situation, I would feel a lot of anger. And I would love somebody just to listen,
Mhm.
um, and then let me get some of that out so that I could think straight. And
Mhm.
so that's what I'm thinking from that um reading right there.
Also see validating emotions. What's interesting is that for me, like in my head, I went straight to wanting to do action, which is the opposite of what we're talking about right now, right? And it's interesting how even like when I'm training on this, like we have to sometimes couple our natural like reactions, right? I'm like, oh, so this is what we could do to, and it's like, no, we need to pause and actually understand, like both a little bit more about, like either why wasn't there enough evidence, are there, understanding more about that side of things, as well as truly understanding, well, we can have ideas about why she may be angry. We actually don't know, right? And what could that really look like? And so the more that we're able to kind of ask questions and just to create that space, and kind of learn more, I think, then any action will be more informed, right? Say she's having a normal response to an abnormal situation. There's nothing wrong with what she's feeling. Correct. Yes. All right, next slide. Okay, so now we're on analyze. Shelly is bringing her 14-year-old daughter, Maddie, to talk with the advocate. Maddie recently disclosed to her mother that she'd been sexually abused by her stepdad for the past 2 years. Maddie says she thinks she did something wrong to make him do that. When you're thinking particularly about analyzing, what would you do in this situation? How would you talk with Shelly and Maddie? And I see, somebody chatted, that maybe, connecting with a child advocate may be the best response. Which in some communities that could be an option. And also we're also wanting to, particularly in with adolescents, helping, because sometimes you're on that cusp, like, is it better to work with a child advocate, or is it better to work with an advocate out of a sexual assault program? But maybe that's also analyzing, like, what are the exact needs, right? Reassuring that there's nothing wrong, that neither of them did anything wrong. Matthews, like asking the question, like, why do you think, right? And then really truly listening to that response to be able to be better analyzing things. Steph, is there anything else you would add to, like, how folks could be using analyze as a skill in this?
So I'm thinking there's two survivors here,
Mhm.
and that's kind of what I'm looking at. Like, this might be a unique situation to where, in order to talk with mom separately, so really looking at that environment and how you're kind of analyzing everything, whether that be, if you do have a child advocate, that would be great. But like you said, sometimes, some programs don't. So just being very, aware that there are two survivors you're working with right here, and how to best kind of get that information.
Yeah. All right. I think, yeah, so there's kind of, the more you're able to kind of like learn, and like one of the things, like, we truly don't even know at this point, right? Like, the mom is called in, wants you to talk to this daughter, for one thing. Does the daughter want to talk to you? There's also, like, so there's like a few, like, the understanding part. I think there's also some other things about, like, hey, in this community, would this be a mandated report? Is this something that so, like, you're also kind of also, when you're forming the connections, you're also taking that next step already and starting to, like, like, strategize and thinking about, where would we go depending on how this, and, like, what is Maddie really needing in all of this, right? So, right, next slide. All right, so now we're on to strategize. So 6 months ago, Bev was raped and agreed to go through the medical forensic exam, but chose not to press charges. The evidence has been preserved, and now, if possible, she would like to press charges. With, once again, pressing charges and not something that an individual does. But she is choosing to convert and move forward with the law enforcement case, right? And so, how would you strategize? How would you develop a course of action? And how would you work with the details around that? And so a few of the things, so some of this is having, like, that solid base of understanding, right? Like, what does this process even look like in your community? Some places have, pretty streamlined processes about that conversion of the kits, um, and kind of what those next steps would be. And others might not have a really smooth process. I also heard being like, okay, so, because, like, some people are like, we always say that people can come forward later, but they just never do. And so you're wanting to try to think about, like, how, like, who and how would you go to kind of figure out what these processes were, as well as what other kind of supports, may Bev be needing at this point as well. Yeah, breakdown of what the next kind of steps will be. And what kind of support she'll be having throughout the process. Anything to add to this, Steph? And so, yeah, as I ask that, as I start to keep talking more, but yeah, so it's like, okay, so how would you work out those details? How would you, and this is going to, once again, be unique in every community, and some of that may be having to engage with other people about how to best strategize.
Yeah, that's all I was gonna say is like, I
Mhm.
think this one is really gonna be depending on a lot of the situation and community and their process, their own process.
Next slide. All right. And so the last two where they don't have their own standalone slides are the implement and reflect and adapt. And so I'll always really be thinking about how the implementation, I think, is sometimes like almost the easiest part where you're doing you're doing the thing, right? Um, but always making sure that we take that time to reflect and adapt. Thinking about what went right, what went wrong, how will this then impact, other survivors, what changes may need to be made to, processes or procedures, and how are you getting that information out there to people as well, right? So even when you're working with just with an individual, how does that also then impact, like the bigger scale of things as well? So next slide. As always, always thinking about through this all, what is that holistic approach? And so even when we're talking about crisis advocacy, you are thinking about even just beyond that individual. We're thinking about, their family, their community, their, even just like broader than that. You're also thinking about how does everybody, how are we paying attention to somebody's body, mind, spirit, and emotions through the whole process? And so this is where it gets hard because we've just asked you to be constantly thinking about like 12 different things at one time, right? Um, and the thing is, you aren't having to consciously always go through a checklist, right? Providing advocacy isn't necessarily task after task after task. It's being present with somebody and having these kind of in your mind, but knowing when to pull out these tools, right? And knowing when to go back and find out more information or connect more or things like that as well. So next slide. There we go. And so kind of been talking about throughout, but uh, when we're thinking about how this impacts both the systems change portion, and some of that is thinking about how when you're making when you're learning, when you're reflecting, how are we then able to use that to influence change with systems providers or other people who a survivor may interact with? How are we also keeping informed about what changes have been happening within their own program or their realm so that we can best support survivor? As well as when we're with the social change, really thinking about how all of this then plays into what we can do for prevention, what this can also mean for, like policy change on like the local or bigger scale as well. But really helping to, even when we're interacting with, human or with, or like with a survivor or with their families, I'm thinking about how that is also always teaching and learning. And the more that we can be dispelling the myths and these like falsehoods that exist about sexual assault, those ripple effects will also really help to create change, both in that individual's life as well as beyond. Next slide. I think this is, I can't remember if that was the last one, if there's one more.
I think that's the last one.
All right. But yeah, and so with all of those, it's just putting those into practice. And we do say, like the more that you can kind of be thinking about this, and the more that even within, if you work in an organization and you're able to, be checking like, hey, are we actually paying attention to all these things versus just doing? And you can also simplify it, right? As I said before, I worked at an organization where it was assess the status quo, see what's happening, make change, and then reflect on that change, right? And so you can simplify it, but at the same point, all of these core skills are things that we do as humans, but we're really wanting you to kind of slow down and pay attention to how that will most benefit survivors within our work. So that is it.
Thank you, Jolene. We are going to take a 15-minute break. So I hope that the message of those core principles were received, and we are gonna pick back up when you guys get back. But yeah, thank you, Jolene. You did a really good job, and I appreciate you jumping on last minute notice here with us. And like I said, we're going to talk with Linda with Advocate regarding Advocate self-care and burnout. So let's meet back up in 15. See you at 12:40.
12:40.
12:40, 2:40. It's 12:40 for somebody on here.
Bye, Steph. Bye, Deb. I'm going to log off and
Okay.
head on
Thank you,
home.
Jolene.
Thank you, Jolene. Thank you so much. We greatly appreciate you.
Bye.
Hello, am I on the right time? Okay. So welcome back. We are going to begin our last module, everybody. You guys made it. I am going to hand it over to Linda to begin that module. Thank you.
Hi, I am really happy to be back with you, and I am so proud of everybody that has hung in there. And we're near the end. There's 92 people in here. So my heart is just full seeing that everybody has hung in there. I know that there has been a lot of credit given to Christine Davidson, who usually guides us through this. A lot of this work is her heart work, but I think that the staff picked up and supported Deb and Stephanie, but really it's Deb and Stephanie that are doing a lot of the work. So thank you so much. I'm really happy, and I know that Christine is going to be happy. So thank you. This is the poll, and we'll just do this in the chat. We don't have like a poll, like the little thing to come up, but what self-care tools are already in your toolbox? You can type them in the chat. Sleep, very important. I put down smudging or using medicines and the tools that we get along the way: sage, sweetgrass, cedar, Mother Earth, walking my dogs. Yep. I think being outside and having that connection between you and the earth, deep breathing and grounding, meditation, face mask, candles, music, prayer, taking time off, bird watching, staying hydrated, beading, crafts, going to the water or the river, walking, candles, swimming. All of these are such good practices. All of them are so necessary. And I encourage you to go ahead and try what other people are saying just to see how it fits and how it feels. Thank you. Getting a good therapist. I try to encourage that. You know, mental health for all of us should be a goal, but there's such stigmas, and you guys went through that module. But you know, if your job and your workplace or your community has mental health support, we can even do it now through texting or through our phone. So whatever options, because sometimes, you know, what's going on is not something we want to share with coworkers or with You know, maybe we do, I don't know, but sometimes it's a lot, you know, so I always don't really know until I'm talking to a therapist and they're like, that's a lot of stuff, Linda. So I think that's how we know we all need the support. Painting, crafts. Thank you. So this is the Advocate Self-Care Burnout module, and it's tips for us to avoid being burned out. The goal is to identify the nature of advocacy work and the impact it might have on advocates. Some of the objectives are recognizing the impact sexual assault has on the survivors, the community, and advocates. Also recognizing common reactions advocates have when working with sexual assault victims that might lead or indicate advocate burnout. Understanding that employers have a role in preventing advocate burnout. And then identifying some positive actions that can contribute to self-care. I feel like this is going to be a good module. You guys have a lot of contributions to share. So as advocates and as community members and family members, some of us are moms, some are grandmas, some are dads, some are uncles, you know, sisters, brothers, but really our interconnectedness is significant with not just ourselves, but, you know, family and outside of family, there's our community and then society, and then the web of life that connects all of us. I had to learn that in a sweat lodge after we had a tragic car accident and somebody had died. And when I went in there, that was one of the teachings that I came out with, that we're connected to everybody and everything, even if we don't want to be. We still are. We're a part of that sacred web of life. So when we think about sexual assault, and I tried any type of abuse, but sexual assault, you know, think of us standing in the middle, that it really does affect us physically, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. So the impact of sexual violence hits the whole being, the whole person. So for survivors, you know, first of all, I'll tell you, I've met people, I think I myself have been traumatized where I couldn't talk or I didn't talk in crisis. But I think when we recognize that in another person, that they've like shut down emotionally, I think that can be, you know, a response. Also, there can be judgment from the family and or the community. We're not born knowing what to say, but we're not born knowing what not to say. So as an advocate, you might not just be working with the survivor, but I've worked with people's kids, with people's parents, with their partners, you know, with their best friends or their family member, you know, that was at a loss and might have come to the hospital with somebody, you know, and didn't know what to say or what to do to be supportive. Also, there can be activations or things that make us remember, otherwise known as triggers for survivors. And that can be, you know, I warned people about this when I've worked with them, that sometimes there can be flashbacks or a certain smell or a song or something that comes on that brings me right back to that place and that time and that moment when this trauma was being experienced. So it's very normal as the brain goes back and remembers and then comes forward and jars the memory, even waking somebody from sleep with those flashbacks and nightmares. Also for the survivor, for some people, the offender might not be held accountable, or they might not know who it is. There's a couple of things that can happen. It's one of the least prosecuted crimes, and it's one of the most heinous crimes. But there can be a lack of results and feeling depleted or like what I told you doesn't matter because nobody's doing anything. That's what it feels like, what I've heard it described as. And then ongoing impacts for people. There can be harassment, bullying, intimidation, threats, that kind of stuff. All of the things we've been talking about the last month. For advocates, the impact can be prolonged attention to the details of sexual assault. A lot of us sit in and have supported people while they're doing their interview with law enforcement or while they're explaining to the scene nurse or to the doctor or the nurse what happened. There's like a set of questions they're asking. So we're listening to that and hearing a lot about it. You know, you don't walk away and you're not unfazed. You do carry part of that with you. Also having compassion and empathy. The lack of results can affect us. I always felt when really things were happening that our system of response was broke and that I was a part of the broken system. But if I didn't show up anymore for for those things, then there wouldn't be anybody there. Now I personally was going to be a broken part of a broken system is what I thought. I don't know, I must have been nearing burnout. Also resistance from the community and backlash. I've had somebody, a couple of people during presentations stand up and start yelling at me and yelling about what I was presenting. I've had a tribal leader deny that these things were happening at the rates that they're happening in community, remembering to have and extend grace and compassion that for a lot of people, it's shocking to hear the stats and what's going on. And I got it said to me once by a dad who said, he said, I need you to slow down when you're talking to me. And he was angry. And he just said, the stuff you're talking about, you talk about that like weekly. You're talking about it. I don't ever talk about it. I don't bring it up. We don't discuss it. So for me, there's a shock that's coming with all of it. And then I was quiet and I thought about it that we as advocates hear all kinds of things and we discuss it with each other or we pray about it in ceremony or church or when we're outside, however you take care of yourself. But we remember the world doesn't talk and think the way we do. So when we have those interactions with people in community, even leadership, we have to grant them that grace that, I'm going to help you to understand what's happening because it's too much, or you never know if you're talking to somebody who survived a crime, just like what we're talking about. Also limited and lack of resources, not having the money or the support you need to make things happen, to get somebody a new place to live if they're not safe in their housing anymore. Also triggers related to personal experiences. Some of us in this virtual circle, are survivors. And some of those things do remind us of things that we have experienced or that we witnessed or that we heard about. So I think that it can bring up things for us too. So some of the psychological terms and reactions can be, I've heard it said, compassion fatigue, secondary trauma, vicarious trauma, countertransference, projecting out, also burnout, and ancestral connections. So there is the idea that when trauma happens or it's experienced, it changes our cell structure and that can be inherited. So I've heard it said that because of what our ancestors lived through and survived or succumbed to or was a part of their history, that's in our DNA and our makeup. So there can be that connection. Also, the reactions can be fatigue, intrusive imagery, distressing emotions. Some people experience sleep problems, with no obvious causes. They can't sleep. You don't know how many advocates I met that can't sleep well. You know, we have trouble with sleeping, and it can be we're staying up, or we sleep and we can't wake up. You know, either way, you know, everything should be or attempted to be in balance. And it can change our worldview and other functional impairments. We can start thinking and feeling like the world is really a bad place, you know, and there is nothing any good anymore. You know, I have been to that level of feeling like that, where was so disgusted with everything and so upset, almost filled with rage at the state of what was happening in our community, and some of the things that were being experienced by people. Do you have anything to add to that, Steph or Deb?
No, other than you know, I've seen, I've experienced myself, and also I've heard, you know, lash back to so many stories, you know, towards advocates. Um, and I really appreciate you bringing in the side from where it's coming from, kind of that view, that understanding, that they don't work in it every day. And they could be also reacting from their own unhealthy, unhealed places. You know, I know I said this in the beginning, where there was an advocate in our community that um, the advocate was helping a relative and a survivor, and the perpetrator, their grandmother tried to run her over. And so it's scary to think about um, just the, especially in a small community, what our advocates are, you know, facing, you know. And so I'm just glad that you're bringing that up, because if you think about it, what that grandma was thinking, you know, that anger, and, you know, and we can even go back to um, when we're talking about the fears that were, and all the things that were um, put on, learned behaviors from the boarding schools, and just, you know, the how deep this is going, how the fear, and then the reactions, and how our societies and communities respond. I think it's really great that you're touching on kind of an overall of it, because it is really hard work for an advocate. And then it's also um, hard on all families affected.
Mhm. Thank you for that.
And I think it's really important that advocates listen to their body, you know, like, because um you know, the fatigue and all that stuff, they might just look at it as, you know, I just work a lot, or they don't realize that they're carrying all that other trauma from someone else. And so it's really important to take that time and listen to what your body's telling you, so that you can take those moments to let it go and find a place to let all that trauma go.
That's really good. Thank you so much. So understanding how our bodies react, the body itself cannot distinguish between the act of violence and the memory of it. We are designed and set to survive. There is chemicals being released, including cortisol, adrenaline, that, you know, when something's going on, how you get hyped up, and your pulse increases, your heart rate, your breathing is more rapid. You know, even listening to something can affect us the same. Survivors disclosing details might activate our body's response. We can also, just what I said, the muscles tensing, nausea, breathlessness, feelings of powerlessness, and a fear of the inability to escape. So some of the warning signs that I need you to listen to and pay attention with your coworkers, is there's no longer any laughter or not having fun at work. There's I think the jobs are hard and they're serious, but we as Native people, you know, we have a real heightened sense of you know, what's funny. Things are really funny, even really hard stuff in the context of too much paperwork or the things that happen repeatedly or somebody who's, you know, something, you know, there can be, we laugh at ourselves most of the time and then people we love and care for. And when you're not doing that anymore and you're not having any joy, I would pay attention to that. Also that you become easily annoyed by coworkers or sometimes even survivors. I saw that in our staff, that there were certain people that just really irritated them. If they came to the door and knocked and they saw it was them, they were instantly upset by it, you know, and said, I don't want to work with her or I don't want to work with him. And, you know, I can't, there's something off, you know, and so listening to that and then, you know, later we, you know, we'll find somebody to work with them, but later talking a little bit more about that and seeing what it is, if they can identify it. But we don't want to harm anybody any more than they're already hurt when they come for support to our offices. So paying attention, you know, to what, how people are treating people. Also minor health ailments, like we talked about the sleeping, sleeping too much or not sleeping enough. But I think one of the things that I didn't recognize was problems with my teeth. That was something, it was kind of under the surface, and all of a sudden I'd get a really bad toothache. And I don't like going to the dentist. It's like one of my least favorite, but I do go. I'm practicing, you know, cleaning my teeth since I was a little girl, but and going in every 6 months. But something, I think deep stress did something to the, I think it worked on my mouth and different things. I'd be in horrible pain and then have to go take care of it. And other people developed, you know, stomach problems, acid reflux. We can either gain a lot of weight or lose a lot of weight. Just different things that can happen as a result to prolonged exposure to stress. We can start feeling less and less excited about going in at all, and we're not fulfilled anymore at work. We don't feel like we're doing something that is filling our soul anymore. Also annoyed, easily annoyed or overwhelmed by minor problems. People that are gossiping in the office. I have a physical reaction to gossip. I don't know what that is, but I think it affects your spirit. But I think if you're talking smack about someone or you're talking about somebody, you find yourself leaning in to hear the rest of the story or, you know, just wanting to know, well, what happened, or talking behind coworkers' backs. I mean, I have heard, and it was said to us in ceremony, that the wind blows your words all over the place, you know, and sometimes people add things to it or they leave important parts of your conversation off to benefit themselves when they're not healthy or they're not balanced. So, you know, and there's the confidentiality piece, you know, not just as an employer, a coworker, and wanting to honor and respect people's personal problems or but also really we're bound by confidentiality with survivors. You know, there is to be no talking about what we've heard or seen with anybody. Also, the quality of our work can start to suffer. We can miss project deadlines with reporting, progress reporting. We can miss, you know, getting things submitted for reimbursement or misdoing our timesheet, you know, not answering crisis calls. I had people, most of the time they were responsive, but when the police department or social services couldn't get a hold of us on our crisis line because we had a rotating shift, I would get the call and I would have to do the response because for whatever reason, the advocate was not answering the call and we can't leave it with no response from our office. So, you know, one of us was going to have to do it. The deadlines we talked about, sleep problems resulting in lower energy, lack of creative you know, being creative or creativity and innovative, that I'm not thinking of new ideas anymore. I'm like all done with the good ideas or with the plans. I am having a hard time. Those should all be like little check marks and warning signs for us.
Linda,
Yes.
I'd like to say, I think it's, for me, it's really, and just a tip, it's really important for me to recognize my window of tolerance and where I'm at, with my work. And with that, I've learned to kind of listen to my body and my spirit more on, if this is too much, learning to ask for help is always a big one that I've struggled with. But, um, so really knowing my cues and paying and taking time to listen to myself and where I'm at. And I know it's really hard when you're doing direct service because you're putting so much into everybody else and wearing many hats. I always just give so much recognition to like our tribal advocates, because we're all advocates, but really I feel like our tribal advocates have a lot more like things to deal with, as far as like talked about living in these smaller towns, everybody knows everybody, so navigating through that and making time for yourself is hard, and it's so important, because for me, one of my tells, I guess, that not that I'm burnt out, but that I am unbalanced, is my dreams. If I'm starting to dream about work, and I know we do, there's the normal dreaming, right? Just things that we have a lot of on our mind. But for me, if I'm having like very disruptive dreams, and that means I need to really take a look at what's going on there. So I think it's so important to know what you can tolerate and to pinpoint that and to act on that when you have learned those and are making time to acknowledge those.
Thank you for sharing that. Deb, do you have anything to say? You worked direct service for a long time too, so.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that sometimes we think that we're the only ones that can do it right. That this is a hard case. I gotta do it. Nobody else is going to be able to do it like I can do it. And that really can hurt the survivor, because you're doing about ego and you're not looking at, are you capable mentally, physically, spiritually, and help, all those ways to actually take on this case. Just because it might be one that you think you should do, sometimes you might want to step back and look, because you have a whole team and you got to use the team as a team, and not just be the only one that will make it right.
Yeah, and Carrie put in the chat, if I don't take time, I will get sick, and then I'm forced to take time. I mean, how many times that happened to us, right? Like we are just
Yeah.
go, 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 and then somehow like it just all catches up with us. Our body has ways of protecting ourselves. Our mind has ways of, creating ways to get through things. And so um I like that Carrie put that out there, because it's very true. Like our bodies can only handle so much, and if we don't catch it in time, we're going to make ourselves sick.
And the other thing is listening to somebody when they say that, like, man, you're off. They're not saying it to be mean. They're saying it because they're seeing something that you might not be seeing. And not taking it as offense when your supervisor says, you should go home for a day. You need to take time off. You're working too many hours. 40 hours is what you're supposed to work. Knowing limitations, because your supervisors are seeing stuff that you might not be seeing, and it's not that they're looking to tell you you're doing a bad job, but they're looking to keep you from burning out and protecting you from some, I guess, sometimes from yourself, like um so listening to coworkers when they say, is something going on, can I help?
Linda Riley brought up a good point in chat. It says, what do you do when you're the only advocate anyway? In Alaska, there are scarce resources, and many of our rural communities only have 1 to 2 advocates.
Well, what we did, because we were a small program also, and sometimes there would be only one person there, like if somebody was traveling or, you know, at a mandatory training, and then the other person was sick, and then there would be we would try to partner with area programs. It didn't have to be somebody that was within 20 miles. It could be somebody that would have an emergency response, because sometimes people can activate services from 100 miles away, because when something happens, we don't, you know, we might not, you know who to contact. But I'm thinking that we partnered with a nearby program and utilized their crisis response. They had a 7-day-a-week, 24-hour response also, but theirs went through a relay system. So I would talk in our tribal coalition or our state coalition, whatever meetings we go to, and I would ask, you know, is there somebody that would take the calls to my program while I have a break, or while I go to the doctor, or while I have to take time off because I'm by myself there. So I'm thinking the coalition could probably be of support, not to take the calls, but and most coalitions still get crisis calls. I do. We do at our place, but I know that they can help direct and link up services so you don't have to be by yourself. And that really, when I'd go to those coalition meetings, even if it was virtual, I would still get the support I needed, even if I didn't say three words. I heard that you know, in that group of people talking, that, you know, their communities and they were experiencing very similar things, where there can be like a sense of belonging and that there's other people struggling. I've had to use programs or direct services from 400 miles from my house, and from where I was down in the Twin Cities, and what was going on was up in Standing Rock. There was a woman that was at the casino who had been assaulted, and they had called and couldn't get anybody to come and help her. So then I was trying to see if I could get somebody to do it through a coalition, you know, and because we know the programs that are there. So through there, trying, you know, I think there can be support, and you should seek that support. Probably through a coalition that can link you up, or maybe you know the next program over, or maybe we could refer people to the Native Helpline, you know, where they can have an advocate immediately. And then knowing that sometimes they need, you know, need a court order, or sometimes they need, you know, the different things that present themselves, shelter, or I need food, or I need, you know, a safe ride to some place, safe, you know, and we can create partnerships with programs that we could support each other, and maybe you would support the program when they go away, that I could forward my calls with, I think, star and then 2 buttons, and then I punch in the number with their permission and their understanding that the calls coming to us, to me, and to our community will now go to them for a short period of time. So we're building relationships and support for ourselves and for our community. Because if you get burned out or sick or overwhelmed, then the community will have nobody to support them. So I think as we're trying to, do you have anything to add to that, Deb or Steph or anybody?
Yeah, I mean, right now we work with a lot of TSAS grantees. Okay, yes, there's my plug for TSAS grant. And a lot of them are like in the middle of nowhere, and a lot of them will work with non-native partners to pick up the slack if they only have some agencies only have 1 worker and they're doing all the on-calls. So they'll work or do an MOU with maybe a partner in town that will do the initial crisis call and then do a referral once the crisis call is done. So it's really like knowing your communities and looking around to see who you can partner with to help with all the services that you need to provide.
I'm glad you brought the TSAS sword, but because it makes me think of funding also, you know, like if you have if the work is too much for one person, then maybe that means looking into other funding, trying to get more support. I know that I don't know a lot about this part, Linda, but I do know that I've heard of people of programs working with like volunteers or interns for working with tribal colleges that may be setting up like a some sort of intern or MOU to bring people in that are getting into the field and having maybe they can do their practicum with you, you know, things like that. It's like getting creative because I know that's what I meant by our tribal programs wear many hats, right? And a lot of different barriers. So I think learning to be creative in that area to support your staff.
And I agree. I think that if you put a policy in place to do internships or volunteers, that's always very helpful for programs. And just another bit on TSAS grant. The TSAS grant is a tribal sexual assault service program grant, and it focuses on direct services for sexual assault survivors and their family. And the one also good thing about the TSAS grant is that it has you can put stuff in there for your advocates to be able to do self-care, which is with a clinical supervision, so that they have a safe place to dump their trauma and not carry it all the time.
So some of the responsibilities of a director or a program lead is we want to work to decolonize or indigenize our workspace with communication and policies that feel right to us. Sometimes that can be an inner office policy. A lot of us are underneath the policies of the tribe, or some of us are in social services space, or some of us, they put me under the court. But, you know, the way I did my work was not how a court would function. So we had inner office understandings that really weren't written down. I had no compensation for our staff that was on call 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, holidays, weekends, nights, whatever, because crime doesn't happen conveniently between 9 and 5. So I had nothing to give them extra. So I wrote into the grant to pay for their medical, dental, and vision for them and their dependents. And then the program paid for it because it was written in the grant. And for some people, that is so important to have the freedom to take your children for care outside of the community. And for some people, it didn't matter much. The other thing is we rotated those schedules, but I think on, you know, a common practice of what, you know, focusing on what helps us, employee lunches, you know, going out for holidays, we'd go and have dinner. We went out on a boat ride and to lunch across the big lake, and, you know, trying to do things to help us to feel more connected. We want to interrupt our habits of scarcity or having to work ourselves to, you know, that we're not dedicated if we're not here till 11 at night. I have worked till 11 at night. I've worked later than that, but that didn't prove anything except that I wasn't really thinking about my own personal health or safety, being in a building that late at night and trying to get a grant done, or, you know, driving by myself 20 miles away to, you know, help somebody or meet them somewhere. You want to interrupt those habits and think about it almost from an extended view of what would I think if this was somebody that I love and care about and this was their job. You know, how can I think about this different, that I don't have expectations that are overwhelming or heavy for people, but yet we get our work done. Also, we want to support and model self-care. I thought that the directors or the leads should be the ones doing, for us, we have a leader that takes good care of herself. She's sugar-free, she exercises, she is in the practice of taking good care of herself. And so we should be that too. We want to model, I'm going to the dentist tomorrow. I have a physical therapy appointment on Tuesday. I'm taking care of myself. I'm going to go for a run. Or we used to walk up, we had a park in our community and we would take lunch, and instead of going to lunch, we would go walk in that park. They had a set of stairs that took forever to get up, but just doing those things and getting outside too when possible. Also supporting and modeling zero tolerance for gossip. If you have that is a rule and a topic, you yourself don't want to get caught up in talking about people, check yourself. That's the only one at the end. We have control only over ourselves. And sometimes I'm more worried about people and what might be happening if they don't show up, or if their appearance or their, communication skills are off. I'm more worried about, somebody's physical health and what's happening to them, not to talk smack about them, but what's happening, what's going on and how can we support you? And we're practicing at our workplace, a whole model through the Move to End Violence and the teachings that came from there, that we have to have zero violence in our own lives, try our best, to live without violence, including violence in the words we use, the manner in which we're speaking, but really it starts with our thinking, getting healing when we need it. Sometimes support is going to sweat or going to church or going to a UWEPI or a dark room, or going for a walk outside, whatever it is that helps you to feel. Some people go on a motorcycle ride and they feel like they've let go of everything. So but really be the model for the things you're asking other people to do. We want to do brief check-ins. At the shelter I worked at, we used to have to check in every day before we started our day. We'd go lock in a room and everybody had to go through if there were changes throughout the night, new people who came in or somebody who left, those things. It was called changeover. So it was just a way to start our day together. But how we do it now, and I do this with, we do it together, Steph and Deb, is that we have a 9 a.m. check-in Central Time, because we have people working across the country, and we do a brief check-in. Kind of how it started was with the medicine wheel approach. You would just talk about how was your night, very brief, and then we move to meditation reading, and then 2 things we are grateful for. And it kind of sets the tone for us. It's supposed to help us. We did that at the beginning of the pandemic because none of us knew what was going to happen. And almost all of us knew people who died as a result of that virus. So I think that then we're dealing with grief, and then we're locked up. So we went remote. And then the next day after she pulled us all back in, we're actually in Red Lake doing a 40-hour. And she said, come back. And when we went to the office, she said, we're going to close the office. And she said, this is what we're going to do. And then so we do these check-ins that are still going on to this day, that helps us to stay and feel and be connected, because we are all connected. Also, you have to have time to allow people to express stress, grief, and frustration. And sometimes some of you have relationships with law enforcement or social services or the clinic. You have the people that are ambulance service directly affected. And when you have a critical incident in your community, whether it's a catastrophic car accident or the death of an officer, or, things that happen, it can be deemed a critical incident. And people in this circle of people who care for people are adversely affected by this. So we have to take the time to acknowledge that and give ourselves some space, and a time to breathe and a time to say what we're frustrated about or what we're scared about, or, just a place to be able to talk. We've done that with law enforcement, and we had a crisis response team. Anyway, also, acknowledging that things are high stress. I did a ride along with the police and I had to sign a waiver, which I didn't even know you had to do, but it said that if that we might be doing something that could cause me harm or take my life, like every time they get in the car or go to work, I suppose. And then we got involved in a really fast, I guess, going like 90 miles an hour on the back roads and trying to get where an assault was taking place. And I was like, I said, after this, I want to go home, because I was like, that, and this is their life, they're responding to the things that we as humans can do to each other. And they see us at our very worst behavior sometimes. So anyway, I think having those debriefing, and some of you have those relationships. I have lifelong relationships with a couple of the people that I worked with that I still talk to, and even though I'm not in the community doing the work, I'm friends with them probably till the end of life because of the things we experienced together. Also working through the ouch moments. When you're an advocate, remember you're biased and outside the system. You can also be very critical of the system because you see when it's not working. And when you have disagreements with people, but I still got to show up for work, I still have to work with them. We have to acknowledge that and try to squash it so that it doesn't affect our working relationship and our ability to have mutual trust and respect for each other and the role we play in creating community safety. We want to be supportive to our staff that have children. When I was a young woman, the jobs I had were not supportive. If my kids were sick, they needed me to be there anyway. Even if I was sick, they needed me to be there. I had, it broke my heart to leave my kids, when they didn't feel well, it was sad to be at work, but we know what that feels like, some of us, so we don't want people to feel like that because something happening to somebody's children, it's just like it's happening to them. And we need to understand that and respect it and honor it and try to create a system that we can be supportive. We have had children come to the office in an advocacy role, though might be kind of dangerous because we've had alleged abusers or perpetrators come to our office. Anyway, I would make space if possible for people to take care of their children in the best way possible, or grant them the space they need to find somebody to support them and help them. So I've met people that don't have one person that can help them with their kids because of, the relationships or harm that has been done. So just to be mindful that that can really affect somebody. If they're not sure about if their kids are okay, they might not be, be able to be 100% present and able to do their job. Also encouraging timely vacations, group activities, what we talked about going out on the boat. We did a retreat. We've done 2 retreats in the last 3 years. And I think that coming together without a work agenda plan, but a plan on how to take care of ourselves and acknowledge the gifts each of us brings to this work and the wisdom that each of us carries inherently just because of our life experience and our roles that we played before coming to this workspace. I think it helps to build really good group dynamics and a good workplace for all of us, and it encourages self-care. At the last one we were at, I heard people talking. There was a bear walking down in front of our when I came out of my daze, they were saying, "Temp, there's a bear right in front here walking." So yeah, it was good.
I was scared I was out there with one of the ones that saw the bear, and after that, I was like, a new fear was activated because I'm from the plains, and We don't
We don't have bears
do
like
stuff
that.
like that. But so every time, like we all had our chores and stuff while we were there, and so I were getting ready that morning and or that evening we got done eating and I was like bringing out the trash and I was like, I've never been scared to take out the trash before. It was I'm like looking underneath places, make sure there's no bear. But I'm glad that you brought that up. I feel like the only reason why I can really help with this module is because I feel like MUSEC is representing self-care, and um I would feel not qualified to do this module if we weren't leading that and showing that. But what you were talking about, Linda, I think is really important as an employer responsibilities to really be looking at those types of things financially, like and benefits, like that is a huge part of employer responsibility. I moved off the res 3 years ago, and so we no longer have IHS, and so I know, but being able to have those benefits and stuff is a huge part, right? Those are our basic needs. They talk about like the Maslow like theory, like just these basic things. So we're um, looking into that and trying to figure that out for your advocates and yourselves and your families is a huge part of self-care. Just being able to not have to worry about certain things. And so me being able to take my kids to the dentist, things like that. Like spoke with one of my niece's father, and I'm like, yeah, I just got done taking the kids to the dentist, and he was like, wow, you get dental care, and he's just like, and so yeah, so keeping in mind that that is part of it, right? Making sure your staff is able to have those basic needs.
Yeah. Also that we should know that a lot of people in community advocacy is probably not an entry-level position. People come, maybe they need some training, but there is, first of all, the ability to care for other people. I don't believe you need a college degree at all to do advocacy, but it is about caring about people, really caring about what's happening. And you can't, no matter what kind of degrees you have, you can't teach people how to care and you can't teach them common sense. So I think that there's no degrees in that. But I was gonna also say it's a critical position that changes lives and systems. Proper compensation packages necessary and should include adequate pay, insurance, and time off. Also, we want to have a culture of support around taking time to take care of yourself. Want to encourage people to find something that works for you and your community and do your own internal work as an employer. You want to make sure that you're taking care of yourself because people are watching and listening to you and what's happening. So you're the biggest example of how you think is how you carry yourself. So for some of the tips, we want to set small attainable goals. Also revisit timelines that we have set up for long-term goals and short-term goals, rethinking deadlines, talking to our supervisor and colleagues about the help that you may need. You want to talk about that. And then build in some kind of fun at work. That should include music, jokes, scheduled lunch with coworkers, the appreciation gifts I was talking about, and talking circles. Changing our routine. We want to learn how to say no. A lot of us don't know how to say no. And I have had to practice that in support group with people. I would make them say no with me because a lot of us can't say it. So we end up borrowing money to people we didn't want to borrow money to, or that we didn't really have, or we end up doing things that we really didn't want to do. But remember, taking a walk, regular exercise, scheduling, just like what your mind needs a break and it needs to think. Staring at the screen is not good. We're supposed to go to the window and look out a couple of miles. That's what the eye doctor told me. It can actually do something to your vision, looking at the screen all the time. Also, never mind what it's doing to your shoulders and your arms as you're not stretching and taking care of yourself, but it's taking care of your body. and then exercising your spirit part. You know, however you do that, whether it's in prayer, singing, walking, you know, acknowledging nature, going and however, whatever feels right to your soul, that's the right thing to do. We want to change how we speak because that'll change, be mindful about how we're thinking. So we want to change any of the things that we talk about, hate, even in passing. Oh, I hate broccoli. Oh, I hate fish. Oh, I hate, you know, to thinking about something I love or I like instead of talking. It's a whole choice on how I'm thinking, you know, are changing things from I can't to I'm gonna try, or I don't. We used to have a problem with this in our house where nobody was allowed to say stupid to anybody ever. And so we want to be inspiring and you know, promoting people to feel better. That interaction you have with somebody can last the rest of their day. And I used to go to work and I would try to smile and say good morning to people. And there were certain people who would never acknowledge that I even just walked by them or said good morning. And I was telling my boss that, and I said, well, you know, maybe I'm bothering them. I don't know. And I said, I probably shouldn't say that anymore. I don't know what's going on. And she said, no, I think you should say that. You might be the only person that's wishing them anything good. She said, I think you should. It shouldn't change who we are trying to be and who we want to be. It should not be challenged or changed by another person's acceptance or behavior. We have to still be who we are. We shouldn't change that. Also, we want to set attainable goals each day with a checklist. You should see how many sticky notes I have on my computer and how many checklists. I have them in my phone. I have them on my computer. I have them in a book I'm writing. So you want to have these little checklists for you. My grandma used to say that when I was like, you better make a list. And I was like, why do you always tell me to make a list? Well, now I know why she says make a list, because you're gonna forget something. Also cultivating your love for survivors in the community. It keeps a clear vision of why we do this work. We instead of two of us heading out to go do a national training and spending a couple $1,000s doing that, we wrote our budget different and our narrative for our grant different, where we brought the trainers to our community. So two of us didn't go and then not share information. We brought the training we were going to go to our community, and they came in, and then we opened it up for anybody who wanted to come. We solicited for donations. You know, we got food given to us. We asked the tribe to pay for it, you know, and help from the area businesses that a lot of our people worked at. And then we actually had a giveaway. We had like collected all this stuff, and when the people came, they got to eat, they got to hear good information, and some of it was spiritually entwined. So they walked away feeling good, but they also got food and they got gifts, because if it wasn't for them trusting us, you know, to come forward and to share what is happening in their lives and us to hold that sacred, you know, we wouldn't even be there, you know, if we didn't have community trust. So we thank the community, and people came out, and it was really good. We did that a couple of different times. You know, how would we handle this culturally? You know, we'd have a dinner or a dinner with information, and then gift people would have a giveaway. So that's what we did. Also, we want to do strategic planning with and making sure that we have built-in time to play and to fool around and have fun. Some of it's drawing. We've had to do a check-in. Nicole made us do a check-in, and instead of talking, she made us draw our check-in. So we had to do a picture and then show each other what was on our picture. We want to surround ourselves with positive people. Even some of our relatives can sometimes not be positive. We want to limit our exposure. We're not obligated to be around people who are angry or, you know, upset about stuff and mad all the time. It is a drain on your energy. So you be mindful who you're surrounding yourself with, and always try to be uplifting, including yourself. So with the natural environment, we want to return in to natural, or try to create balance. So we can use water as a cleansing, healing. It is the first medicine for many of us. And just getting in the shower, having a glass of water, or being able to have water, on you. I've seen people smudged off with water. It refreshes your spirit. Also, the food, having relatives, or the making of relatives, humor, laughter, meditation, solitude, music, singing and dancing, also rituals of releasing feelings. A lot of stuff can go with that, including emotional pain, fear, the rage I was talking about, and then the grief and letting go, or releasing those feelings. And then ceremonies can be extremely helpful for people. But some people don't do that. But whatever you believe probably has a way for you to do all of these things. I think most belief systems build this taking care of ourselves in a good way. So each of us has 7 generations of lineage residing in our body. We each have, sitting in this circle, 32 maternal ancestors and 32 paternal ancestors. So can you imagine how many people are sitting here in this circle if each of us has 64 ancestors that are present every time we're sitting? Can you imagine how many are sitting here? What is 64 times 95? It's a lot of people sitting here. So with the water, our body is made up of an average of 60% water. Babies have more in their body. In our body, oh, Amber, go ahead.
I was just trying to push the heart. Sorry.
Oh, no, I think you have something to say. No, just kidding.
Thanks. You guys are actually doing awesome. That's what I would say. I appreciated the training. And I just, everything that a lot of the stuff I get to pass forward is knowledge that I've collected coming to your trainings. So I appreciate all the work you guys do. And thank you for the last couple of weeks, as I know we're wrapping up. So that's all I have.
Thank you so much, Amber. So in our bodies, water looks for an unrestricted flow. The body is a container of all that lives inside of it. Water comes in, the earth changes. When you express an emotion, your body changes. Air moves water to move and to open our minds. We breathe the air. You can create your own emotional relief. I don't know how many of you walk around, and I wasn't even aware I do this, but sometimes I hold my breath. I don't stop to breathe. I'm just constantly, running or doing things really fast and talking a mile a minute. So we want to be conscious of our breathing. It can slow down your heart rate and your respiration by concentrating on your breath. We know that the air we breathe in, it changes the water in the emotions. Also, air gives life to fire. It needs the air to be able to be a fire. A healthy mind has an easy breathe. A fearful mind has a controlled breathe. Also, a healthy body has a tranquil breath. And an overwhelmed body has a labored breath, where it's that fast, one's breath is the direct reflection of our state of mind and our body, and vice versa. We want to use our breath to quiet our mind, and to use our mind to slow down our breathing pattern. And what'll happen is we'll be relaxing our body. And we have to be taught to do that, because some of us don't know. And we should be teaching the people in our family on how to get control of their breathing and their mind. There is nothing more powerful than to be in control of your thinking. This is Rock the Reptile. Oh, we had to do this in person in Bloomington. So you guys should stand up If you can, it's good to stand up. And you're going to shift your weight from left to right, breathing in through your nose and exhaling through your mouth. So left to right. Breathing out through your mouth 4 times. You want to loosen your jaw, loosen your shoulders, loosen your stomach, and visualize your connection to the earth through your feet. You'll feel yourself become heavy in your bones and your body. You as advocates can do this alone or with your staff. You can also do it with survivors. Sometimes when somebody's telling their story, it can be scattered and in pieces, but you can help them to come back to the present because they're trying to remember. And in the remembering through trauma, we can have it be jagged in different parts, so they might forget something. But when you help them to slow down and to breathe, things start coming together in a format that is easier for them to process and easy for us to get a hold of and support them. So it eases disorientation and it can reduce anxiety. Most people I met, they did not even know what they were experiencing was anxiety. They've had it. When I physically described anxiety, they said that has happened to them. It can be so disabling that you could feel the sensation, your throat's closing, or you can't swallow, or you're having a heart attack. I've seen people have to be taken out in an ambulance because of it. It's very powerful when you lose control of your thinking, and trauma can really do that easily. So we do want to practice daily for grounding ourselves and being able to do that. Children they listen so attentively that they hear this, and you'll see them. I seen little kids sitting there trying to breathe. It looks cool to watch them. They can learn easier than us because we think we know so much. No, but kids will listen and learn and practice.
So, Linda, I have a story, and this isn't when I was working in prevention in the schools, and we would read these books and teach, kids how to deal with their anger and how to breathe in deep and let it out. And so I was thinking about changing jobs, and I went into this local store, and this little boy came up to me and said, I didn't get in trouble at school today. I stopped, like the dinosaur said. I took a deep breath and I let it out. And I was so good the rest of the day. And I was like, okay, I'm staying where I am because obviously they're learning, right?
That's a really good example of how it works.
I'm glad you reminded. That just felt good to stand up. You know what I mean? Even just, but yeah, I mentioned that earlier. Like I'll hold my breath. Or so anytime like it's on the slides, I'm like, oh yeah, isn't it crazy? We need a reminder to breathe. Like I don't know, but so thank you for doing that. And I'm glad I wore pants today because what jumped up with some pajama pants on? No.
I'm really glad you wore pants too. Thank you. Silly. It's funny. So here's a self-care polling question. I don't know what this is. So in what ways do you take care of your whole self? Look at this medicine wheel and the directions. And this is different for all tribes, but pretty much the medicine wheel looks the same, but the things that they identify in the different directions can be a little bit different. So are there areas inside of you that need attention? See, to the north is air, the use of cedar, winter, spiritual health, learning and listening and being a part of convos with elders and grandparents, reflecting on those relationships. To the east is fire, tobacco, spring, our mental health, thinking about our mental health. What did I do today for my mental health? Also representing new beginnings. When you think to the east and the sun coming up is birth and childhood for many people. To the south is earth, sweet grass, summer, physical health. Did I do anything to support my physical health? Also representing youth and adolescence. And to the west is water, sage, autumn, our emotional health. Did I do anything today for my emotional health? And then represented during that circle of life is adulthood, being parents. And of course, the north is the ones we talked about in the beginning, including spiritual health and us, if we're blessed enough and fortunate enough, becoming elders and grandparents ourselves. Sounds like, oh, that's a long ways away, but it happens so quickly. Let's see. These are some really good comments. Listina's talking about walks, drinking water, smudging daily, prayer, read. I could use more rest and balance. And then Steph is saying she journals and she keeps all her check-in gratitudes that she writes down. We have that check-in gratitude and the reading in the mornings. So I think when we think, and you're not just a body doing a job, you also have a spirit and a mind, and you need to take care of all of you and help your sisters and your brothers and your circle to take good care of themselves too. So you think about strategies for change, what works for you. I think we have people, I have something floating around here. I think we have people that have different practices, and then people who are trying on different things and what works in their organization. I don't feel like what we do at our organization is the end of it. I think it is a practice. And as we get more information, we change a little bit of stuff. And, we want to be the best we can be. For right now, I'm the best I can be for right this moment. But I'm open to new ideas and new ways of doing things for myself and for my organization. So I think that if it helps us, guess what? Happier, balanced people who aren't physically sick and who aren't tired all the time, they do their best work. So the payoff is you get somebody who's healthy showing up for work, and they'll do their best work if they're in balance. So we'll do our best if we're in balance.
And the one thing about advocacy is you can't be there just for a paycheck. Advocacy is about coming from the heart, like Linda said earlier. So it can't be that you're just there because it's a job. I mean, that also might be a sign of burnout if you're just there for it to be a job.
Oh my gosh. That is it. So when I think about this, I want to say thank you for all of the work you do. Thank you for your dedication to this training to help yourself and your community to have, enhanced advocacy skill. Thank you for your commitment. I hope you take good care of yourself. And thank you to Deb and Steph for holding it together. Thank you to the ASL folks that showed up, both Angela and Hercules. I've worked with Hercules before. Thank you so much. I'll see you.
Thank you, Linda.
Yes.
I'm getting kind of emotional. This is the first 40-hour. I've jumped on some modules for the 40-hour, but Christine usually leads the 40-hour. And so I just want to thank Deb for sharing all the slides, ASL for sure. You guys are always wonderful to work with. Thank you, Amber, and everybody. So I think we are getting done a little bit early, which is fine. The next step would be we're going to be sending out the eval, and let me get that link right now. Hold on. And we would all really appreciate, because that's how you guys are going to get your certificates also. And I don't know how long it's going to take for a coalition manager to send that. So once you submit the evaluation, which I lost with my a whole bunch of tabs up right now. Deb's always giving me crap about all my tabs. It's not pretty. I do actually clean it up a little bit before we go. Before we jump on the 40-hour, because I don't want to be like too scrambled, but I put that link in there for the SurveyMonkey. And we use that evaluation to continue to keep these modules up to date, and just really that I just want you to know that that feedback is used. So please take some time on that. And MUSAC is actually updating all of these modules, and right now we're really focusing on that on to make sure that it's inclusive to everybody. And we did point out there's some areas that needed updating as we're going through them, right? Like some areas that we wanted to improve. And so we really appreciate any feedback that you give. And that is, like I said, through Coalition Manager, that's what you registered on. That's where you'll also be getting an email with your certificate. So once you submit, I'm not sure how long it takes, but I think look out. Let me see what Becky said. I think she said keep an eye out for it for a few days until. But I'll be sending out an email. Yep, she said should also be watching for their certificates, which will come from Coalition Manager in next week or so. So if you don't receive it right after you do the eval, just know that they will be coming hopefully next week to you.
Okay, and I just want to do another plug for TSAS because the 2024 solicitation is out. Like I said, there's different amounts for the grant. Like last year, 5 grantees got $1.25 million for 5 years. So there is money there to build up your program. And like I said, it is for direct services for sexual assault survivors, their family. And when I say sexual assault survivors, I want to make it clear that's from age 0 to 100. It's also if you're 20 or 40 years old and remember that you were sexually assaulted as a kid, anything to do with sexual assault, TSAS has direct services for. So
Is that that you said that solicitation came out for that one?
as far as I thought I saw it come out. I can check real quick.
If Deb finds that, we will put that in the follow-up email that I send out. And so does anybody have any last minute remarks, or feel free, you guys are we encourage anybody to jump on if you'd like, if you have any final questions. Thank you, Holyoke.
I just want to say thanks to everyone who participated, and I just have really appreciated hearing the speakers and also everybody in the chat. It's been wonderful hearing your advices and experiences, so thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure spending time with you all. And yeah, we have I believe Christine is planning on doing an in-person 40 hours, so keep an eye out for that. Also on our website, miwsac.org. So thank you. We will stay on again for another optional debrief. But if that, I'm gonna put that link in there one more time. That is the SurveyMonkey evaluation link. We hope that this information you can take with you to, support you while you guys are helping our relatives through this hard time. And we really appreciate, and we definitely appreciate it, everybody jumping in and giving your knowledge also. Thank you.
I can't find it online, but I know that Sydney had said something about it, but I can make sure that Steph gets the information and puts it in the email just for you to look at. I mean, you could go to Office of Violence Against Women, Tribal Affairs. It would tell you more about the grant. It would give you more information, but you know, if you're a small program and you want to expand in sexual assault, this is a good grant to do that.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, June. All right. Well, you guys have a great rest of your day. I'll be sending the resources. And yeah, thank you for completing the 40-hour with MUSAC. Thank you very much. If anybody needs ASL for and are planning on staying for the optional debrief, please let us know. And I can type it in chat also. Thank you, Justin.
Wopila, mahalo, salamat po. It was nice doing the 40-hour again with you guys.
Oh, Hercules. When are you going to the sex trafficking conference?
I would like to, so make that request known.
Yeah.
Let everyone else.
I still have my medicine over my door.
Oh, so sweet.
I have
Oh,
mine on my altar back here.
Yeah,
on the altar. Oh my God. Yes, that's.
I already burnt the candle. It smelled amazing.
Oh yeah. Did you get the kapalana or the pikake? I can't remember which flower.
It was white. I don't know. Sorry.
One of those flowers. It's great.
Yeah.
Oh no, you two did great. Shout out to Jolene and to Linda
No,
for like yeah, you two make a good team, so it was nice to like work with you guys because like when I worked with Christine and Rebecca, when Rebecca used to be part of MUSAC way back, just like it's interesting seeing the evolution of how the 40 hours has been changed in like the different hands, and it's like it always is a success each time, so it's nice seeing you two do it.
Thank you. I was thinking that too. I was like, oh my gosh, Christine's not going to be here to help, and I was like, how can we invoke her spirit to be here with us? And I'm like, as the weeks went by, I started thinking, we all hold different information and then we all come from different places. And so I think it all is going to align how it's supposed to, and things that Deb and I know, and, and whoever the team of MUSAC is going to be popping in to help, it's all going to happen the way it's supposed to. And
Right.
so, and it did, like, I feel like I know there's a lot of people that came on. This is not their first time going through it. And so now they get to see a different perspective in a way. And next time also it will be the same, so I love that. Thank you for saying that.
course. I'm gonna go continue ASL interpreting. So,
Yeah, thank you.
hi, Diane.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Taylor, I am so fond of your nonprofit. It helps so many women. If you have any availability to speak with me, yeah, I will. I'm gonna write your number down, Taylor. I got your email too.
Oh my gosh, perfect. I'm so glad. We at Bethel, we're doing a project on nonprofits that specifically help Native women. And I found your nonprofit and it is so fantastic. And me and my writing partner, Ella, we are just so fond of it. And we decided, we were like, oh my gosh, we saw they have this event on Thursday, let's go. And it was like, all your lectures were so important. And we really thought that they were really impactful and really well said. And they really, I mean, opened our eyes and I think the eyes of a lot of other people here too, just so much. And yeah, I think it was really beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. I will give you a call. And to see who is available for that. I don't know if I'm the right person, but I mean I can. So but yeah, I'll reach out to you. Thank you so much for your kind words.
But you
Awesome.
might
Thank you so
want-
much. Okay,
you might-
bye. Have a good day.
Taylor, you might really want to talk to Nicole because she's been here for 21 years.
Yes, I emailed Nicole and I hope that she gets back to me soon. If you guys have any contact with her or could put in a good word or anything, it would be so helpful. I would love to be able to speak with Nicole.
Yeah,
I
I think
can
she's
text.
out of town, right? This week and next week.
Yeah, she's on travel a lot, so sometimes hold on, let me get off. We're still recording. Thank you, everybody.